As sentient beings, we find ourselves thrown into a world that inflicts immense pain and suffering. So having the option of a graceful exit should be seen as a basic, universal human right. Since our existence is better to never have been, we should all have the right to die. Welcome to the Right to No Longer Exist, a Right to Die podcast. In this show, we attempt to change the perception of society's views of voluntary euthanasia and what true autonomy could look like.
Welcome to the Right to No Longer Exist podcast. I'm happy to be here. Sorry for the delay. It's been a little bit of a gap between our last episode, but I'm happy to be back, and also happy to be back with our special guest host, Ashley, which she was on, I think, episode 6 or so of the podcast, and now she's here to help me through this episode with our wonderful guests here. So how's it going, Ashley? Thank you for being a host for this.
Yeah, it's going great. And I was episode 8, by the way. But so if you guys want to check out my podcast, it's episode 8, and it was a really good one. So check it out.
She's biased, but yeah, she's thanks for correcting me. And thanks for coming. It's really fun to have you here. She's a great friend now. So thanks for joining. And we have an awesome guest, very sweet, awesome person, Michael. And we are glad and excited to have a conversation with him about all things right to die, of course, and everything in between. So thanks for joining us, Michael. We really appreciate having you on. How you doing?
I'm doing very well. Thank you very much for having me.
You bet. So I guess we jump right into it. You know what? Share with us whatever you feel comfortable with about how you ultimately got to be so interested in the right to die and in your story.
Yes, of course. I mean, I first got interested in the movement when my own grandmother asked for assistance in dying at home, because at the end of her life, her mental state had deteriorated to such a point that she didn't know where she was, who the people around her were, and she was in a considerable amount of pain. And sadly, instead of giving her a dignified end like she wanted, the doctors forced her to stay alive. They were forcing drugs into her system, and her wish to die was just seen as a mental illness, and she lost all right to make choices for herself. And I just thought that was incredibly sad for such a loving and caring woman with such a rich and vibrant life to be let down at the end and to completely lose all bodily autonomy.
Yeah, it's so funny that people talk about, the people have such fears about someone not having the cognitive ability to make the decision for themselves of exiting. And yet when someone declines to a mental state to where they can't, people feel this empowerment that they can be the ones to choose for them. But somehow someone else isn't able to choose that for themselves, even when they're struggling. And it's kind of like, I find it kind of ironic, that even in the midst of that, they're not allowed to have any control of, like, somehow other people have more say in how they are feeling than they are, because I think that's one thing that's always clear is pain and suffering, regardless of your mental state. Like, people know when they're suffering, because they're screaming, they're going to scream, regardless of whatever state they're in, or voicing uncomfortability, yes. A negative state. So I don't know. I just find it kind of in society to be so arrogant in a way, to be like at that point.
To have others say we know what's best for you, despite not actually living with the pain and suffering that you are. It's, as you say, it's kind of ironic and a little dehumanizing, I think.
Absolutely.
I agree. Another thing I find ironic too is that, a lot of people, their defense for not allowing most people, death with dignity is, well, you can't play God, if we allow anybody who wants to end their life and end their suffering, we're playing God. But they kind of are playing God by forcing them to stay alive in the suffering. So if you use that logic, it's like you're playing God either way, only keeping people alive, forcing them to stay alive against their will is playing God, but in a suffering sort of way, like not even a nice way. Like God is supposedly love, yet, what they're doing is opposite of love by keeping the suffering going until they die of natural causes.
It's a good point, because if God is love, then you think God would actually choose to help them exit early because he would be against suffering. Like, exactly. As if if a God is sitting back and watching the suffering and being like, yes, there's a reason for all this. There's a cause for all this. There's a big grand purpose behind it, to glorify me or something, that's basically, it's borderline on a sadistic God, right?
Yes, because you've got to think, I suppose, that were God to exist, I mean, I'm an atheist, but if God did exist and there was heaven, that means they're all observing all this suffering that's happening all across the earth and are happy with it.
Yeah, that's a good point. They're just, it's crazy and weird, and I don't know, it all makes no sense really, but I think that part of playing God, the theism part of it, is such a massive part, where it's, but then again, because it's just so hypocritical, because it's like, God, let your will be done, and yet everyone's doing things under their own accord, and so it's like, how do you know what God's will is anyway? You could never know,
And when you said that they're playing God by forcing these people to stay alive, Ashley, that they also play God when they help premature babies when they're born. They're playing God and keeping them alive. And,
good point.
And for all sort of medical decisions, like removing an inflamed appendix or fixing a broken arm, they are playing God. So it's not as if it's anything new to them. It's just running contrary to what they want.
Yeah,
exactly. It's like they got to give themselves a pat on the back, like, "Oh, yay! I did such a good thing today. I'm so great." It's more ego than anything else, I think.
Yeah.
And the part that I could maybe grant them is the fact that, like, there's one exception to the rule, is even though you're right about breaking, taking care of a broken leg and stuff, but this is like life and death. This is like playing God in a sense where you're controlling their destiny of their fate, their death. That's a big deal. It just kind of, the stakes are higher in that regard.
Yes, much higher.
Yeah, but you're right. I mean, doctors will take a person that's been in a car wreck, a severe car wreck, rush them in an ER surrounded by 12 people, sticking needles in them and everything like that, and nobody's asked them, hey, did you want to do this? Is this what you want? Do you want to go through this whole thing and stay alive? I mean, I know it's a time sensitive issue, but I mean, even then, doctors don't read anybody's specific advanced directives that they may have at that time. It's always just, heal, fix, no matter what the cost, that kind of a thing. And
it saved them because we believe we can.
Yeah, and for the high fives at the end of the day. Now, has this caused you to be an activist in any way? Witnessing your grandmother and being interested in the right to die. Is it something you've been involved in at all, or is that something you hang back on, or also what could activists do to make a change?
Well, I've only really been aware of the movement for about a year, so I wouldn't consider myself to be an activist. But I guess if the conversation could be brought to those in power by all those that are in need of a dignified exit, I believe that the message will get across. And I suppose if I find more like-minded people in the UK, we could build a movement here, much like I assume there's one in America and possibly Australia and, oh, I don't know, Colombia, just all around the world, because I'm sure that there are more people who believe, like we do, that life, while having the potential to be beautiful, does come with the drawback of, well, there is suffering and none of us are getting out of it alive. If you see where I'm coming from, life does have quite an undignified end. If you go through it by natural causes, you're usually old, infirm, and relying on other people. So I think giving people that choice of a peaceful end, when they want it, how they want it. Would it be weird to say that I think that would be the ultimate human kindness?
Oh yeah, I think that the most compassionate thing you can do would be to give someone that right and say, you're now empowered. It's now up to you. It's not You're not now a slave to others to decide for you how much you want to endure or not. So uh, absolutely. And I wish there could be, I think society could just like, if somehow society could just have those conversations, like so much more in such a larger scale, obviously like a larger platform, some like larger, public figures could talk about it. I mean, you could get just one popular, celebrity or politician commentary person, like, to just bring it up and bring it up often. I think here's the problem with it all, I think, is that a lot of people actually agree with this, and they just, one, they don't care to do anything about it, and two, they're just lazy. They're like, yeah, if it's on the ballot, I'll vote for it, but like, I'm not going to do anything to get to the point where it's on the ballot. I'm just going to like hang back. And so that's the frustrating part to me is, these millions upon millions of attempted failed suicides where people end up maimed and everything doesn't get people to think about, whoa, like, what the heck are we doing? This is insanity. I mean, the amount of damage and pain and suffering that's happening by prohibiting these methods is just sad. It's so super sad. And I think if the society just was complaining about it, the same way that we complain about identity politics now or something like that, like, I think it could pass through fairly quickly. I mean, you're going to have the religious, far religious that are always going to be against it, but yeah.
Oh, sorry. I mean, what you said there about just how sad it is that there are so many people who attempt suicide and end up horribly maimed. There is also I guess there's also the psychological cost, both on the sufferer and the sufferer's relatives, to see that somebody was in so much pain they deemed a very painful and very unlikely to work method of ending your own life was the only way. And there's also the financial cost as well, because I did have the number in front of me, but I've lost it. And it was, the cost of attempted suicide is staggering because it's all the emergency services that need to be involved. It's the hospital stays, it's the aftercare. And potentially, depending on how seriously maimed the individual is, there could be permanent care required if they end up paraplegic or left on a ventilator, or with, I don't know, damaged kidneys from attempted overdoses, damaged livers that require more hospital attention. There is a huge financial burden that's placed on a on an already taxed medical system. Now, I'm not saying that that's the fault of the people who attempted suicide, not at all, but it does need to be considered. We need to give people a method that is guaranteed to work, that lets them say goodbye, because quite often people might just leave a note, and that's not enough.
Yeah, that's an amazing point. Like, that's so insanely true. I mean, millions, just one person's attempt that does however they try to attempt, ends up paraplegic, let's just say, for 25 years. The amount of money, the state is spending on taking care of that person daily is insane, when all of that could have been prevented with literally a 50-cent pill, X amount of millions of dollars out the door, wasted, when it could have just been a 30-cent prescription of a pill, whatever it would be. But if the demand was high and the supply was there, obviously, literally, our insurance would cover whatever. It would literally be that, it would be $1 for the pill. Ugh. So it's frustrating.
Yeah, and not only that, but like everywhere, in a medical setting, they're so understaffed. There's not enough workers. There's not enough. They're not being paid enough. Like there's already so much discord in the medical field, both for patients and for the nurses. Like that's why the nurses are leaving in droves. And I do believe that, if like what you were saying, Kevin, a 50-cent pill was available to those who wish to end their lives in a peaceful way, that was, basically fail-proof as well, that would probably make a lot more room for the people who do want to live and who need care, but who can't get it because of the understaffing. They can't get appointments for a month out. Like, I think it would really help. And I want to get to your point, what you said, Michael, about how, some people just can leave a suicide note and that's all, because otherwise, there'll be intervention. It's so true, because right now, if someone were to call a family member or a friend and say, I'm gonna exit right now, they would get the police called on them in a heartbeat. So obviously, all the person who wants to end their life can do is leave a note, if they even have the energy to do that in the first place. But not only is it sad for the individual exiting, but so many family members are get blindsided. They're like, oh my gosh, I never saw this coming. Why did he just leave a note? Or for those who didn't leave a note, why didn't they leave a note? And it's like, I think the grief could be so much less if there was more closure and there got to be a end of life celebration while they were still here, rather than all the secretive blindsiding stuff that is just so unnecessary.
Almost like a way.
Yeah, only while they're still alive. Yeah.
I mean, imagine hugging someone before they die rather than after. Like the amount of emotional closure you would get, that you would just get. I mean, yeah, it'd be hard. It's not like it's not hard, but life is hard. That's the problem. There's no easy end to this. All of this is going to be rough things. So let's just cushion the blow, per se, as much as we can. And that would be, if there wasn't so much taboo and stigma, that's exactly what it would turn into be. Some halfway pleasant closure. And you see it in these videos with people that are taking their lives with the legalized death with dignity or MAID or whatever. They're just hugging their families and everyone's at peace, and they're and if people who don't want to be there have issues with it, they're just not there, and so that's okay too,
Yeah, of course.
What's it like? You're in the UK?
Yes.
What's the overall environment and thoughts about in the UK? What's the current right to die movement there? I know you're close to Belgium and Switzerland and stuff. So they're really super liberal. But what are your thoughts on all of that?
Well, at the moment, the UK is currently debating whether to permit it for the terminally ill. So I guess right now I see it in its infancy, but I see what it could become. Because you said that we're next to Belgium and Switzerland, and we could have similar laws to them, and similar to Canada, the Netherlands, Colombia, Luxembourg. But I think it'll start with the right for the terminally ill, and then I think after a while we could make a push to let it branch out for the mentally ill as well.
Yeah, that's great. I would love to see that too. That would be awesome. It's funny how people like need to be baby stepped through this. You know, we have to have kid gloves through this whole process, because when you say an 18-year-old should have the right to die no matter what, just it's up to them. No questions asked. They walk into a clinic, they get their pill, they walk out. Like, to me, that's my opinion. I feel like it really should be that way. But it's like in society's thinking and our culture and our we're, you know, this pro-life crap that we are living in, it's really disgusting, and it's really like authoritarian, you know, totalitarian, like to like be so aggressive against it that we have to be like, oh, 90-year-olds with stage 4 cancer is okay, you know, and then they do their little pretzel logic in their head, and they're like, oh, I guess that's okay, you know. But it's sad, because in the meantime, to go from the terminally ill to, like, let's say mentally ill to universal euthanasia, how many years is that going to be, if at all? And the process of those X amount of years, people are going to die horrific deaths. So, you know, to me, the blood's on their hands, and so to speak, you know. It's like you're the one that's preventing this and slowing down, muddying the pace of progression. And so it's kind of on you by doing that, you know, society's prohibition. I mean, that makes sense.
Yes, and I suppose as an American, you're quite familiar with prohibition in the historical sense, that actively banning the consumption of alcohol didn't actually make things better. It made things a whole lot worse, because they ended up making their own alcohol, and they had alcohol poisoning, and there were gang warfare and various other crimes. The prohibition only seemed to make things worse.
Oh yeah, big time. It's insane. I mean, they throw you in a mental hospital for 3 days, you know, involuntarily, and they just have this really condescending infantilization towards you, like as if you're just some inept adult that can't even do 2 + 2, you know. Like, it's so insulting to these folks, and it's like, oh, makes me so angry, you know, because it's the effects of that prohibition is brutal. Yeah, I mean, you could make a list of 100 things that are awful.
Yeah, it makes me really angry too. I know you were saying, Michael, that you know, that therapists and psychiatrists seem to be a little more lenient with the you know, with just being able to talk about the, you know, the right to die and stuff. But here in the U.S., if you go to a therapist or a psychiatrist and you even mention, you know, suicide, basically, like they pounce on you. They're like, do you have plans? Do you have a method? You know, they start interrogating you, and it suddenly turns from, you know, warm support and compassion, if you're even lucky to get that, to, you know, oh my gosh, like, it's a life or death situation, and we don't care why you're suffering or what's making you suffer, or, you know, anything like that. They just like, oh, we got to save a life. And like, so the root cause of the suffering doesn't even get focused on at all, because they're just so into saving your life. And it makes me angry too. I don't even go to a therapist or a psychiatrist anymore, because it's like, what's the point? Because you have to censor everything. Like, I almost have to like do a dry run in my head of, you know, what am I going to say to this therapist or psychiatrist? Like, when I was, you know, seeing one, I pretty much had a dry run of what the session was going to be like in my head, because I was like, can I say that? Can I say this? Like, And it was so stressful. I eventually just quit. I was like, this is just not even worth it. It's not helpful at all.
Oh, that's abysmal. No, therapy should not be the therapy be having to walk on eggshells. It should be a free and open discussion.
Exactly.
Yeah, that should be the whole point, is to be like, talk to me about your problems, but don't talk to me about your problems. It's like, what? F you. Like, no thanks. Like, if I'm gonna talk to you and try to be open and vulnerable with you, yet I have this looming thing over my head that if I say the wrong words, I'm gonna be literally locked up in a cage for saying it. It's kind of like, no thanks. I'd rather just talk to my friends.
Yeah, I feel so blessed to have the NHS, which is, they're just incredible, because, as you said, Ashley, if you say the wrong thing, you're like, oh no, I'm going to be sectioned. But whereas with the doctors that you see on the NHS, or the therapists you see, you can be totally open and honest with them, and they'll just talk to you. Granted, if they think that you pose a threat to yourself or anyone else, then they will take action. But they still treat you like a human being.
Yeah, that's nice, because here they really don't. Because if they don't, then they could lose their license. And so then it becomes, a matter of, oh my gosh, I'm going to lose my license. And it really, it just kind of goes back to our point about it being all about about them, not the sufferer, but the people who are supposed to be there for us, therapists, family, friends. It all winds up to them being uncomfortable, or them losing their license, or whatever, and then it's just like, who cares about the suffering person? It's kind of how it feels anyway.
Yeah, and I think a good sign of that is, to me, when they do say you're going to harm others. Like they say, we don't want you to harm yourself, but they also say, or harm others. And that to me feels like the selfish part of it too, because when was the last time some suicidal person just harmed others? Like, it's happened, I get it, but it's like, most people just want to get out for themselves, and that's it. They don't have some big agenda, I'm gonna shoot up the town before I go kind of mentality. I feel like even if you had a legalization of a right to die, you're still gonna have people that want to make a point before they go, and they're going to burn their house down or whatever before they go. And there's just not avoiding any of that, because that's just part of this life. It's part of this game we're playing that's dark. And so it's not going to fix everything, but geez, will it fix 95% of it? Yeah, heck yeah. Yeah, so do you have an opinion or critique on any of other countries' laws? Do you study the current state of the right to die movement globally or anything like that? Or
Well, I only have a brief understanding of the laws in other countries. I'm aware that Switzerland is the destination of choice, but I suppose my critique would be that I wish the policies of these countries that do allow voluntary euthanasia would make more provision for the mentally ill, or those who are not terminally ill, because in order to get the green light, so to speak, it can be quite difficult. There are loads of hoops that you need to go through, and a doctor needs to check your records and agree with you that your suffering is intolerable and cannot be alleviated in some way. So it doesn't annoy me, but it does concern me that those safeguards are in place. Granted, they want to make sure that they're helping people who are in real desperate need, but it just doesn't seem fair to me.
yeah, and I've kind of learned that even those places, even though I'm glad that they're there, for some folks, it's it's not even about money, having the $10,000 or so you need to get. It's they have a very strict criteria to get in. I've had about, I don't know, three or four friends like actually apply, and they all have like chronic ailments that are what you would think be enough. And everybody I've known that's ever talked to them have been rejected. So it's frustrating. I'm with you there.
Yes.
So even though people think it's just like, hey, if I got the cash, I can just show up and say, hey, where's my Nembutal? Like, it's not like that at all. And I understand them being, cautious for sure, because it's the only thing out there. But it's kind of like learning about the death with dignity stuff too, where I thought it was a cool thing when they legalized it. You'd hear about it on the news or whatever. And I was like, cool, another state did it, but then you read the criteria and you realize, oh, like these numbers are really sad because it's so bad. Even in Oregon, there's 5 million people in the state and only 200 people utilize it. And that's not evidence of the lack of desire, right? It's all it is just evidence of more prohibition at work on some level, because it's so hard to meet that criteria. The process of all the paperwork and all the therapy, some people just give up. They're just like, oh geez, I can barely write a suicide note, much less see 4 doctors, get tests, prove, send in my medical paperwork to whoever, you know what I mean? And so that needs to be taken into account too, that a lot of people that want out just don't even have the energy to do much of it at all, much less all this work that's involved.
Yeah, all the work, all the money. The other thing that kind of sits wrong, doesn't sit well with me, with Pegasus and Dignitas, is that they say if you're 18, 18 or older, you can apply. So I feel like for many, I mean, at least it did for me, I feel like it sparks false hope, because you're like, oh my gosh, I finally found a sanctuary. Like maybe, somebody will actually help, and I'm finally safe now. But then you contact them and you tell them about you and your ailments and why you want to die, and they just write back and they're like, we don't help the young. And it's like, well, how old do you have to be if you're actually able to receive services? Like, I think it's false advertising to say, if you're 18 or older, apply, because they really only seem like they want to help you if you're like 50 or you're even older. Like a lot of the people in the videos that you see are like in their 70s or 80s or 90s. Like you don't really ever see anyone in their 20s or 30s or 40s or 50s, I think. So the false advertising is also really discouraging, because you finally find a tiny, tiny sliver of hope that you haven't found in so long, and it's just snatched away. And it's like, wow, so you pretty much lied. I mean, that's how it feels.
Yes, yeah. I mean, that harkens back to my reply when I approached Pegasus and I told them my diagnosis, and they said, yes, this is something we can help with. How old are you? And I told them, and they went, no, that's far too young. We can't assist you.
Oh, geez. Well, that's pretty straight up evidence right there. And that's really, gosh, that hope that you get to be disappointed, and then you hope in some other thing and to get disappointed, it really wears on you after time,
It's beyond crushing. I mean that, if anything, it makes your mental health even worse. I mean, it's beyond crushing. It's horrible.
I mean, it's doing the opposite of what literally everybody else in the world wants you to do, is stay alive. But all you're thinking about, being constantly all these doors closed in your face, is being like, geez, I just want to exit even more now. Like
exactly, because you're that much more hopeless, and hopelessness is what makes the desire to die even stronger.
Yeah. Well, what to you, Michael, would be a perfect right to die policy?
I suppose for me it would be available for anyone at any age. So for the terminally ill, it could be however quick they want it. I suppose for the mentally ill, or let's say the able-bodied, so that includes people who aren't ill in any way, give them a period of time, perhaps say a few years, and tell them, look, this is a huge decision that you want to make. We'll give you a couple of years perhaps to think about it and really set everything in order. And then at the end of those 2 years, or however long they say, if you still want to go through with it, then that's absolutely fine. And we won't try to stop you. Because I do think it should be a right for everyone, because suffering, after all, is completely subjective and is different for each person.
Yeah, I'm totally willing to like grant that if that's what it takes in order to get like some halfway rational euthanasia policy in the world. I'm willing to be like, okay, fine. You want 6 months for this condition, 3 months for this, but a year for this. And in the meantime, you can have your therapist invade in your life all they want to try to convert you back into the addiction of life. Maybe there's a pill you haven't tried or something, and it's sad, and I hate that, but I'm willing to like make a compromise about it. And I hate it. It's not like I like it, but I understand that like the growing pains of the evolution of being fully accepting a right to die like this is hard for most people. So
Yeah.
I understand that, but it's annoying because in my worldview, I'm just thinking like, yeah, it's a right to die for everyone. Like done. You either have a right, it's like Danny said, you either have a human right or you don't. There really is no gray area. Like it's just one or the other. Either you're a slave or you're not a slave. Period. And suicide prevention is slavery to me. You're preventing someone from doing what they want to do with their own body, and keeping them from making decisions based on their own body. To me, that's no different than slavery. So, little rant there.
I mean, to me, the biggest problem with suicide prevention is that it infantilizes the sufferers. And I think, Kevin, you'd mentioned that before, and it treats suicide as some sort of moral failing. It's shown as the act of the desperate. It shows the sufferer as that they're out of their right mind. And while in some cases the act of suicide is out of proportion to the stressor, there are plenty of cases where the individual is suffering uncontrollably, but the suicide prevention methods don't discriminate between the two instances.
What do you mean when it is shown as the act of the desperate?
So by that I mean they don't believe that it's something that is done by a rational mind, that it's done by those who are clearly out of their mind, they're deranged, there's something wrong with them, they need to be coddled, they need to be looked after, they need to have their rights taken away, they need to be locked up. Whereas statistics of suicide do show that it's not, say, just the young that attempt it. Quite a lot of the elderly do as well. And it doesn't discriminate against race, age, gender. Suicide is a problem for everyone.
Yeah.
But it sometimes, and I do mean sometimes, it is somebody with a rational mind coming to a decision and going, yes, this is what I need.
Oh, yeah.
And I think perhaps if you, like, in order to get, say, the pill, the peaceful pill, or the way out, if you could explain to the psychiatrist and demonstrate that it is a rational argument you're making and you are not doing it out of desperation, I think that could be one of the hoops that we might have to go through, but I think it is a necessary one.
Yeah. And there could be safeguards too against this fear mongering of the slippery slope, where it's,
Yes.
you know, you could have a power of attorney, so to speak, but it's a friend, it's a loved one, it's someone that's closest to you, that knows you and your desires of what you want, how do you want it to end, all of these things. And if the state or whoever thinks that you're not in the right mind or clarity of mind or whatever, which is, I would argue, a lot of the time, I mean, majority of the times you are being rational about it. You could have this other person advocate for you, say, hey, yes, I know this person, they're my best friend, they're my brother, whatever, and there is a piece of paper that says this, that like I have the power to decide for them. If the therapists believe that that person isn't in the right mind, they can say, no, yeah, they've wanted the right to die their whole life, they talk about it all the time, they might even love life and everything, but they said, kind of like how an advance directive is, when this time comes, or something that happens where I want out, and then I have to reach this point where they're trying to prevent it by saying I'm not clarity of mind, that power of attorney can overwrite the therapist, and that's the ultimate decision making. You know what I mean? Something like that.
Yeah, so I actually spoke with a friend of mine whose son is actually in a worse condition than I am. He can't work, he can't even leave the house. His conditions are that debilitating. And to sort of argue against this slippery slope, he doesn't want to die. He is not suicidal. He says that he says he wishes that he could go out, lead a normal life, get a job, start a family, and do all the things that all the able-bodied can do. So to say, oh well, if you permit it for the mentally ill, they're all just going to end their lives. Well, no, because there are bound to be some, and I did encounter some whilst in a stay at a mental hospital, that didn't want to die. They did want to get well. They did want to get better.
Yeah. I have a story I'll share with you. I don't know if I have it before in other podcasts, but maybe I don't know. I was in a bad mood one day, driving in traffic, thinking dark thoughts. I was in a bad place.
Oh, I love this one.
I stop at a stop light where there's a homeless person with a sign, just panhandling, whatever. And I'm like right next to him, though. I'm just right there at the stop light. He's 5 feet from me right there. And my window's down. And he's like, hey, man, how's it going? I'm like, hey, how you doing? Or something like that. He's like, just how you doing, bud? And so I thought it would be the ideal situation to have a confession with somebody, because it's at a stoplight, so it's time sensitive, and it's a stranger, and it's a homeless person. There's no, he doesn't have, like, what I presume to be, doesn't have the criteria to, mandatory report me, whatever. So anyway, I was like, yeah, man, I'm thinking about killing myself. I don't want to live. I hate life. It sucks so much. And his response to that, this guy that was homeless, clearly homeless, struggling, looks like he hasn't showered in months, whatever. He was just like, man, what are you talking about? Life is so good. Look at the sky. Look at the clouds and the sun and the breeze on my face, man. Life is so good. Don't be doing that. Don't be talking that stuff. And it's like, it was so wild that he was telling me that, because not that I say I'm expecting all homeless people to be suicidal. I was just blown away at his condition and how I know that I wouldn't want to live if I was him, but it was just like surprising. I was like, whoa, geez, like this guy thinks life is completely amazing and he sleeps on the sidewalk, it's crazy. It was just, it was interesting.
Yeah, I think it's quite remarkable to see the invulnerability of the human spirit, to show that even at our lowest, there are some of us that can't be broken.
Oh yeah, true. And a lot of those can be religious types, which is fine. And they kind of accept whatever it is they want because it's God's will. So they do a lot of mental rationalizations and stuff. But
Yes.
some people really want to live. And in fact, even when you want to die, you still have your survival instinct within you, which is why I would claim you're the most courageous person to opt out of life, because you've overcame that, our programmed DNA instinct to survive, and so it's just some people are just kind of enjoying that more than others, as far as, that instinct to survive.
Yeah, suicide is definitely not the coward's way out. So many people say it, oh, it's the coward's way out, or oh, it's selfish, or it's this and that. But I personally think that taking your own life is one of the bravest things anyone can do. And it's oftentimes not selfish, because even if the suicidal person, doesn't leave a note before they exit, there's a pretty good chance that they do think about their family, their loved one, their friends, their loved ones, their pets, everything. It's just at the end, sometimes there's just no more energy for a goodbye or an explanation or anything like that. It's too emotionally charged. But yeah, survival instinct is definitely in a lot of people, even if they really, really want to die, they've wanted to die their whole life. I think it's pretty much the hardest obstacle one can go through in life, is ending it.
Especially if it's like a dangerous, way, jumping off a bridge or setting yourself on fire or some crazy, whatever, drinking pesticides or whatever. Like, gosh, I mean, you really, you really do have to have some courage, and it's, yeah.
I wanted to make a point too. Sorry, Kevin. I wanted to make a point too. I've read stories in countries where euthanasia is more lax, like Switzerland, Dignitas in particular, where people have gotten the green light to exit, and they ended up not going through with it because they knew that at any time they could exit. So even if the legislature allows for euthanasia at some point for more than just the terminally ill, if they expand it to mentally ill or even, anybody who wants to die regardless of any kind of disability, some of the argument is, oh, well, so many people are just going to, kill themselves. It's going to be a mass suicide event and the economy is going to collapse and the whole world is going to end. And it's like, actually, I think for a lot of people, the relief of knowing they have an out when they want it is going to make them able to enjoy life a little more. I mean, depending on the level of suffering, if it's really bad, they might still want to go. But if it's not so dire, just having that is going to be such a huge relief. It's going to be like, wow, okay, I could just sit back and I can breathe. I can look at the sky and the sun's out and the birds are singing, so.
Yeah.
So, Ashley, what you said actually reminded me of a story of a woman in Belgium whose depression was so bad, and she requested voluntary euthanasia, and she was granted it, but like you said, she didn't go through with it, and she just said it's like this huge weight's just been lifted, and she says that she's enjoying life a little bit more. She can do a little more. I mean, she's in no way cured of her depression, but she says that she's enjoying life a little bit more just knowing that the way out is there for her.
Yeah, and that's, I think last year, Oregon State prescribed, and I could be a little bit off on the numbers, but I'm fairly close, close enough. But Oregon prescribed around 500 death with dignity prescriptions, but it was only 200 to 250 that actually utilized it. So the percentage, I don't have it in front of me, but it is about just only 50% that actually took it and utilized it. So, that kind of, to me, is an argument against a slippery slope right there, because the whole point to it was to have what Ashley was saying, is this peace of mind that option is there. It's, my sock drawer, it's like ready to go if I need it, if it gets to that place. And that's so beneficial. Yeah, so what would you like to say to those who oppose the right to die for people in your condition?
I'd say that they should suffer along with the rest of us, have some sort of incurable illness that leads to unendurable suffering. I mean, they say doctors exist to do no harm, but think of all the harm they're causing by demanding that those who suffer stay alive. Who are they staying alive for? Who's benefiting? We're frequently told that we have a lot to live for, but the people who say that are typically in fine health themselves. And I think they should experience the same level of suffering as we do. Then I think they'd understand. They might not agree with it, but then I think they'd understand where people like us are coming from. People against this right often fear that offering assisted suicide will lead to suicide by contagion, so much like the spike in suicides after 13 Reasons Why. I would argue that with the proper safeguards in place, such as mandatory waiting periods, this can be avoided. And I also hear sometimes that permitting the right to die will, like as you say, cause a slippery slope where the vulnerable will feel pressured into doing it. But aren't there vulnerable people in different strata of society who want to live? I mean, we've discussed the Belgian woman, Ashley, you've mentioned quite a few people that even just knowing that the option exists, they'd feel so much better. Because we're not talking about spur of the moment decisions, we're talking about careful considerations.
Yeah, great point. I think that's huge. And I think sadly, I don't know what degree of people, but a lot of people might be the type of people that need to put their hand on the stove to feel how hot it is before they realize, oh, don't put your hand on the stove, and that's sad. And it's a bummer, that people just can't figure it out rationally and logically. This all makes sense, not to put down your story at all whatsoever. I just think, like, it's stories like yours or people like you where they have a personal experience of a loved one that died a really bad death, and you have these really bad memories of it, and it basically tarnished their whole life. Your memories of them isn't like, oh, I loved my grandma because she was so funny and whatever. A lot of times people, it's embedded in their memory so much of how they died. Like, oh my gosh, I just can't get that image out of my head of them, screaming in pain and, being in a condition that's so we're avoiding that stuff by bypassing, so to speak. It's a cheat code. It's a life cheat code where, like, I would want my family and friends to remember me in a positive way, not this grim, dark way. But that was just addressing one of your other, like, you made many points there too. That was awesome.
Yeah, that was awesome. And, speaking of bypassing, I think another reason why people, bypass the whole idea of death with dignity is because nobody wants to talk about suffering, because if we talk about it, it might happen to them, to the people who don't want to allow it. And those kinds of people, in my experience, don't have a good relationship with acceptance or admitting, life is okay now, but it might not be okay in 10 or 20 or 50 years, so they just want to think about the here and now, and everything is good and rainbows and sunshine, and they totally miss the mark that, yeah, life is rainbows and sunshine for me, but it might not be for everybody else. Like, they just want to think about the happy things, and it's like that's not really how life is for a lot of people. So that was something I wanted to address. And the other thing is, you were talking about safeguards being in place, and for people who are requesting euthanasia. And I think there should be safeguards for therapists and psychiatrists too, if the people, who request it are willing to speak to a therapist or a psychiatrist, because so much of the fear there is, like I said earlier, losing their license. So I think there needs to be a safeguard of, it's okay to talk about this more in depth. You don't need to call 911 the second, the S word is mentioned.
Yeah.
It's okay. You're not gonna use your license, lose your license or lose your clients or get bad publicity. Like it's okay,
That's a great point. Yeah, because people feel obligated to report these folks that had a fear, because they're like, if I don't report them, then shit, and they do die. Now it's on me. Now I'm going to lose my license. I'll lose my career. There's a lot of fear involved in that.
Yes.
Yeah, wrongful death lawsuit. Even maybe even manslaughter. In some cases, people have gone to prison for manslaughter because of quote unquote assisting a suicide. It'd probably be unlikely for like a therapist for that to happen, but you never know. Some states are really weird about suicide.
Yeah, that's why we need activism to get out there and hopefully change the perception of it all. That's the biggest thing, and just be like, this is okay. This is an okay thing. This is a good thing. There's nothing bad happening here. Like, it's all bad. Life is bad. I'm separating that, but I'm just saying that the act of compassion towards giving a peaceful and dignified euthanasia is good. There's no negative to that, as long as if it's not coerced or anything, and it's voluntary, then it's voluntary. Like it just falls under the my body, my choice principles. What could like a right to die activism look like to you, Michael? Like, what new directions do you think it could go, or what does it need to do differently?
I think it needs to strike conversation with those in power. Certainly in the UK, the right to die for the terminally ill is widely accepted by the general populace, and it's currently being discussed. We could see an introduction of the right to die for all within our lifetime, but we need to talk to our leaders. We can show them the total cost of yearly suicides and say that money could be saved just by permitting the right to die for all. We could show the total cost of care for those who don't want it, and saying that permitting the right to die would ease the strain on an already taxed healthcare system. Now, I'm not saying that those people who do use, let's say, mental health services, or let's say the terminally ill or the elderly, I'm not saying that they should utilize the right to die. They should have the choice.
Yeah, totally. I wonder if the medical industrial complex would have a problem with that, though, because if retirement homes opt out because they know that their entire life savings is getting sucked out of them by staying at these places, and they're not going to be able to give any money to their kids and all these things. I wonder if they would have they might fight against it, just is all I was thinking, because they have an interest in making a lot of the money that they make in the last stages of people's lives. They make a lot of money. But yeah, hopefully there would be some other kind of safeguards that prevent. I kind of lost.
It's like we have to make the right to die profitable somehow, like for the government to even think about it. I think like talking to people in power is like a good first step, but like, let's be real here. At least in the U.S., like all the people up top care about is the money. So it's like we got to find a way to make it profitable for them somehow. And I don't know how. It's just what I think.
Yeah, I don't know how you could do that, but I agree. Like, there's zero incentive to legalize this because of the money that's being made off mostly older folks or people with terminal issues, and just raking in the money from insurance companies.
Oh yeah, big pharma, retirement homes, like you said. All that.
Yeah, it's quite unfortunate that in the end, money talks.
Yeah, and it's sad that has to get all infiltrated into this conversation, because it shouldn't have anything to do with it, but unfortunately it is.
I mean, I think that's the whole reason why they legalized marijuana in a lot of states in the U.S. is because the states that hadn't, that were slower to legalize it, once they realized how much revenue was being made in the states that did legalize it, they were like, oh yeah, let's do this. So like, to me, that just shows that money is going to go a long way in making this happen, this euthanasia business.
If you could say something to someone struggling with the same situation you're in, what would you tell them?
I tell them not to attempt suicide, as it's very unlikely to work, and it's more than likely going to leave you in a worse state than the one you're already in. Instead, I'd recommend to try and find an outlet in this community, because I'm sure there are loads of like-minded people that you can find support from, and maybe you could become an advocate for the cause and help sway minds.
Yeah, I think that's huge, because I tried therapy, I think twice, and both times were a joke. They really are. And I'm not just, I wasn't trying to hate on it. I really wasn't. I was giving it an honest, attempt. And they were just so bad. And then I found like a community of folks like us. And it was like, I've never felt more therapy and therapeutic to talk with someone like us and hang out and discuss how you really feel than with people like you guys and the friends I've made. And it's just kind of just funny how it was all for free too. I didn't have to pay you. But I totally agree, like to have that, to find a community that, and I also totally agree, if I may take over again. I think like if someone's saying like, I'm really struggling, I really need help, I'm really struggling, and you see that they're in a desperate state and there's a possibility for an impulsive decision, I agree. I always say like, please try to take it easy. Please don't, whatever, if you don't have a method that's peaceful, like don't do anything crazy, because that's exactly how these painful failures happen, is unplanned, impulsive, reckless kind of activities. So yeah, I agree with you on that.
Yeah, I'd also like to add, yeah, definitely what you and Kevin said. Definitely, do not do it on impulse, because most likely you're not going to succeed, and that will just make the situation so much worse, because then people will know what you did, and that's going to bring a whole other set of issues, and also just the recovery time, and people are going to be really eyeing you like a hawk after an attempt that you don't aren't able to succeed at. But another thing I would tell them, like, there are ways you can research how to do it. Like there's the Peaceful Pill Handbook, written by Philip Nitschke. So if you think that they're going to just be receptive to like, oh, please don't attempt, it's probably not going to work. Like some might be able to be like, okay, you're probably right, and calm down. But some people are just that determined that their suffering is so great that they are just like, I don't care. Like I'm going to jump off this bridge tonight, or jump in front of this train, and in that case, there are resources. They're hard to find, and people are doing some stuff every day to censor content. But there is like the Peaceful Pill Handbook, and the Hemlock Society, and just other material you could find. So that's something I like to tell people when they're looking for something, a way to end their life that's peaceful and dignified.
Was there another time in your life that you thought about dying, or if so, did you regret not doing it?
Well, due to my schizoaffective disorder, there have been multiple times in my life when I've considered it, but to spare my mother further pain, I choose not to, since she's already lost one son. Not to suicide, but I think it would be cruel to do it to her a second time.
Yeah, I respect that, and that's thoughtful of you to do that. And I think a lot of people consider that, and It just means we're empathetic, and that's it's not selfishness. It's the complete opposite, actually. I'm sure most people think about others and how.
Yeah, that goes back to my original point about how people were, oftentimes say, "Oh, people who kill themselves are selfish. That all they're thinking about is themselves." And you just proved my point that no, it's often not the case. Like you just said, you don't want to do that to your mother, and so many other people who are wanting out feel that way. That's the one thing, maybe even the only thing holding them back is the worry. Oh my gosh, what about my loved one? What about my mother? What about my sister? What about my dad? What about whoever, my husband?
So does this mean? Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
No, please.
Because Ashley, I think you'd mentioned it before about suicide being like the coward's way out or an entirely selfless act. But yes, it's exactly as you say, that quite often people who are suicidal are often the most empathetic. They feel their emotions more keenly. That's probably why they feel the way they do.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, and they look outside in the world and they see all the suffering, and they see the diseases and hurricanes and whatever, and it affects them in a different way than a lot of other people. Some people can look at it and be like, oh, it is what it is, or that's just nature doing its thing. That's kind of a glib way to gloss over the reality of the suffering. I think people like us realize, like, no, this degree of suffering it can run so much deeper than people think, and it's unfortunate that until you experience, like, people, for those types of people, maybe they just have to experience it to get it. I don't know, like, personally have to experience it. But yeah, if your country had an assistant dying, in the UK, is there at any point that you would have opted for that option and in your life?
Yeah, so I think I would have waited until my mother had died before taking the option. And I think the options such as Dignitas and Pegasus are too strict with their criteria. I mean, I understand that they need a doctor's prescription, but there has recently, so this year, been the case of Erica Preissig, who helped with an assisted suicide that led to a court ruling easing the burden of proof for the right to die for the mentally ill. So I think eventually most of the Western world will adopt similar policies to that of Switzerland or Canada, like the Benelux countries. I think it's only a matter of time.
That's great. Yeah, and those events and those legal things and those wins and battles or even just news, media, it just gains the attention of people to spark the conversations up again, and that's huge for sure.
Yeah, it gives me a lot of hope too. Like, 'cause sometimes it's discouraging when nobody's talking about it and everything. People are just at a stalemate, it seems, and so it is encouraging when there's a new article about another country that's at least considering the right to die for the mentally ill. Like Canada's been considering it for a while, and it keeps getting pushed back a year and a year and a year. So that's frustrating, but it gives me hope that it's at least up for consideration.
Yeah, and who knows how long it might take or not take, and who knows how far it will go, because a lot of it is determined on society's position as far as economic collapse or climate change or climate collapse, or if negative things happen bad, like a World War III or something. I think people are really going to start having conversations about it then. But it's just kind of sad that it has to come to that, to even talk about this. Like to me, this is a conversation worth having while you're sitting at a bench eating ice cream at Disney World. Like, it doesn't. That's how much I'm like okay with it, and I don't mind having these kind of conversations. But most people are like, they'll give you that face like you're some crazy person or something, and it's like, ugh. Oh, okay, you don't want let's not talk about reality. Let's talk about the football game on Saturday or whatever.
I know it's like everybody has to be suffering, like you said, Kevin, World War III for people to even, give it remotely even think about it. It's like, I believe humanity lacks so much compassion. It's like, oh yeah, let's all talk about it. Know that World War III is on the way and we're all going to suffer. But while everything is calm, who cares? Next, right to die. Oh, I don't want to talk about that. Let's turn the page. And it's just like we just lack so much understanding and compassion.
I've certainly noticed that when I'm at, say, work and people ask me how I am, I have to somewhat bite my tongue and not really tell them how I'm feeling. So I give them just a very general answer of, yeah, I'm fine, how are you? And I don't really and so I never end up telling them, or it feels like I've got this monster inside of me that's going to claw its way out unless I have the right to die. It's difficult.
Yeah, and it's when you have depression too, just as an example, like for me, it's just that small talk stuff. Hey, how you doing today? Going through the grocery store line or something with getting your bread, like, hey, it's going good. How are you doing today? And it's a real struggle because it's not the truth and it feels fake, and it's exhausting. Yeah, to kind of not be able to voice how you actually feel, like you just said. So I'm with you there.
It is exhausting, and I really, what really gets under my skin is that people, preventionists especially, they say if you're feeling suicidal or depressed, call somebody, call a friend, call a family member, call me even, and then you take them up on it because they sound so genuine, and you actually take them up on it, but then they're just like, oh, this is too dark. I really don't want this negative energy around me. You're too negative. And so basically it's just virtue signaling, but they don't really mean it. So then it just makes the depressed person feel even more hopeless and alone and alienated.
Or they give you thoughts and prayers.
Yeah, that too.
Well, it's the same thing. Yeah, it's all just meaningless drivel. Like, let's talk about. I always love these preventionists too that always say, like, let's have the conversation. They always say that. They're like, let's have the conversation about mental health, and real issues and suicide. Let's talk about it. But they actually don't want to talk about it. Because if you start talking about it, then and get too deep with it, they're like, no, I basically wanted to control this conversation and guide you towards getting better and continuing to being addicted to life. I want you to continue this rat race. Please, please, please keep chasing the cheese for me because it makes me feel better. Like what Ashley said earlier, it's just this selfish thing of just like, I think I'm doing something good for you, but it's really only making me feel like I am some angel and virtue signal. Yeah. God.
Yeah, it's like the people in need of comforting, the one who is suffering actually ends up doing the comforting instead of being comforted. It's so backwards. So what I like to call it is faking it till you make it. Fake it till you make it, or faking it till I'm making it, because you kind of have to. It's like you have to fake it or wear a mask. There's different ways of saying it, but yeah. So basically, I do the same thing when I'm out. People are like, "How are you?" It's like, "Oh, I'm fine," and you just gotta fake it till you make it, and that's so alienating, especially when the normies, I call them normies, the neurotypicals, they're like, oh yeah, let's have the talk, and then you try to, and they dismiss you, and like that's actually gaslighting because they're saying one thing, and then you're like, oh, okay, this is going to help me, and then they're like, oh, no, we didn't actually mean that, and then it makes you feel like you're crazy. Like, am I crazy? Like, didn't they just say you could talk to me? And it just makes you feel even crazier.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's such a great point. Such a great point. It's like, to me, the phrase in my head with your fake it till you make it is protecting. Every time I'm always, whenever I'm doing that, I think when I say that, I'm like protecting. I'm protecting my own suicide by not talking to these people that will call the cops on me and throw me in my hospital, and
Exactly.
and so I just have to do whatever I have to do to protect myself. Yeah. It's crazy. So like, so there's positives and negatives to exiting life. Obviously, like you're causing pain to others, when you leave, and then obviously, to me, being a pro-moralist, the positives are that you're just not existing anymore, which you're not going to suffer, and the earlier the better. Like, these things are my ideas, but anyway. But Michael, what do you think? What are your thoughts about like the positives versus the negatives of having to exit life, but on your own terms?
Well, I suppose that the positives include a proper goodbye with friends and loved ones. And I'm sure we've mentioned this before, that it's needed. It's cathartic to be able to say to a person that you know will no longer be around how much you loved them, how much they were there for you, and just how you enjoyed spending time with them. And letting people die with dignity is kinder than forcing them to continue their lives in suffering. And it's also it's wanted, and it's completely within our own control. And we've mentioned this before, how in Belgium there was the woman who was granted her voluntary euthanasia and ended up not using it just because merely the act of having it lifted a tremendous pressure off her, and she could finally get on and start enjoying life. Although I do suppose that there might be a sense of regret of exiting earlier than natural, a type of FOMO, if you want. But then you could argue that fantastic and interesting things had happened long before you were born, and they would continue to happen long after you died. So either way, you'd still be missing out on things.
That's so interesting.
I love that. I have never thought of it like that before. That is amazing.
Yeah. That's really huge, because I have that fear too. If I check out, like, what if in a year from now, you get a good job, you meet the perfect girl, whatever, all these things that you think of, and it's just like, also, what if in the meantime, in a year from now, when those good things happen, you lost a couple legs in an accident or whatever. Eh, the negatives always will find its way to creep into your life. But to think of it, though, as all these some beautiful things have happened before your life and after your life. I don't know. Just repeating what you're saying, but yeah, it's a great point. So yeah, what do you hope for the world from, like, I guess the better word is just like, from having interviews like this, is there changes that you would hope that could happen, and what advice could you give to our listeners about this topic?
Well, I hope that the right to die becomes readily accessible around the world. I'd like to see our political leaders willing to discuss it with us. Perhaps not grant concessions on every point we make, but at least be able to sit there with us and go, yes, we do hear what you're saying. We're not going to have you sectioned because you believe what you believe. We're not going to try and force anything on you, but we will listen to you about it. And I'd advise listeners to write to their political representatives and start the conversation, because I do believe that this right to die could become legal in our lifetime, but it is something that we need to chase after.
Great points. Yeah, I totally agree. And, that would be so great to have happen, and hopefully more conversations and stuff can get people to realize that the only way to get to having real conversations about this is to have real conversations about this, like not just say, let's have a conversation about prevention and how life is great, because that's all it is right now, is like, let's have these conversations about mental health and getting better. It's always about getting better. But what if there is no getting better? What if your state that you are in is a permanent state that you're going to have for the rest of your life? These chronic ailments are proven to be lifelong, and there's by the hundreds. So what do you do about that? Like, until you have conversations about people that are struggling in that regard, you're not having real conversations. You're just trying to say, like, oh, let's mental health, let's get therapy, let's get, have you tried the Prozac that I've heard of? And simple fixes, band-aid fixes, basically, when you're sitting here with like a missing arm and they're trying to put band-aids on the wound. That's how I see it. It's dark.
Yeah, me too. Me too. Yeah, no, it's so true. And yeah, so yeah, I think, Michael, you're definitely right about, writing to the powerful people, Congress here in the US, and all, and the more people who write, the more likely it is to get on the ballot, and then the people who were, didn't have the energy or were too lazy or didn't know how they felt one way or the other can actually vote, because once it's on the ballot, they'll be like, oh, you know what? Yeah, it's on the ballot. Why not? So like, we need to get it started so that it can be on the ballot so people will see it and actually vote. And the other thing too is we need to, I don't have all the answers, of course, but there needs to be a way for people to feel safe having these conversations. Like writing to the government is a good first step, but I think there still might be a hesitancy because people want to have the conversation, but they still might not feel safe. Like, what if this is a trap? Like, what if I delve into my story too deeply and I find myself locked up? Like, there needs to be a certain safeguard as well in talking about this, so that more, because it's like people with mental illnesses, we feel so alone because we can't talk about it. The stigma is so severe, but we're not alone. There's probably more people that think the way we do than we even realize. But everybody, it's like being a closeted gay person or something. It's like I feel like I'm in the closet a lot of the time, and I used to feel like no one else feels this way. I'm the only one. Like, I'm crazy, but no, there's a whole bunch of us. But if the safeguard is in place, then I think more people will start coming out of the closet, so to speak, once they realize, hey, this is okay. I'm not going to be locked away just for saying that I'm suicidal.
Yes, and because I would like to point out that I do think that there is a difference between suicide and the right to die. I see suicide as the often painful and prolonged death that often doesn't work and often permanently damages the body, whereas the right to die, what we're advocating for, would be painless and quick.
Yeah, good point.
Oh yeah, it's a good determination, or between the two, for sure. Because people can get mixed up in a lot of the semantics of verbiage. Voluntary euthanasia, right to die, physician assisted suicide, just suicide in general. There's so many. I think it's important to clarify what is what, because maybe you get two people having a conversation and your definitions are completely wrong, so you're not even really having a debate on the right topic if you're just talking past each other. I agree with Ashley completely, is regarding just this like discrimination that you feel to not talk and not be able to say how you feel. I mean, even just being an atheist today is still, weird if you talk about it. If someone over here, I've had it happen to me just oh gosh, a 50 times, I don't know, like I'm talking about it in public with someone or something, and someone just comes up to me and just says, do you know Jesus? Did you know that there's a way out of the way you're thinking, or something like that? And I just want to be like, dude, like what? This is, it's 2023. Can we get past a lot of this crap? And right to die should be one of them. It's just like the ultimate taboo thing, and one of the biggest human rights issues there is. Even Amnesty International doesn't recognize the right to die. How huge is that? And what a failure that is, because they have the budget and promotion to be able to promote, like the way they would want to promote. And it could be a really simple, sweet, cute way to promote it. We don't have to talk about all these harsh, dark things or anything. And we could sell it to people in that way if it's probably just painted in that picture that they can digest. But is there anything else you'd like to talk about, Michael, or any thing that maybe we didn't bring up? I think we talked honestly about some really good stuff, and we covered a lot of areas.
Yeah, I think we've covered everything.
Okay, great. I mean, it was truly amazing to have you on. It's a pleasure meeting you. I love your sweet, friendly, kind demeanor. It's so welcoming and just awesome. Yes, I wish there was more of that.
Thank you. Well, I'd love to be on the podcast again.
Yeah, we'd love to have you. That'd be awesome and great.
Yeah, for sure. You are so intelligent, Michael. I love your intellect. I love your open-mindedness. I love your accent. I love, like Kevin said, your kindness. You have so much compassion. So many people today lack compassion, and it just drips off you like chocolate chip cookie dough. It's just so.
Thank you very much, Ashley.
Yeah, thank you for being on.
Yeah, thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
So yeah, I want to dedicate this episode with our special guest Michael to our special friends, Danny, the co-founder of The Right to No Longer Exist. As everybody I think knows, he's passed away, and he'll be forever missed, and I miss him to this day. It's been 4 months, and I still miss him every minute of the day. He was one of my best friends, which I truly love him. I'll miss him forever. And also our friend Joey Casey, he was a guest on our podcast as well. I forget which number. I think it was around 6. And please check him out. And he passed away, I think, about a month ago. And really just amazing person, amazing intellect. To talk about compassion. I mean, he had the biggest heart of really anyone I've known. And he was such loved by just so many people. And me and Ashley just definitely want to dedicate this episode to our friends that have passed.
Yes, definitely. They're definitely missed. We love you, Danny and Joey. And yeah, good. We're happy that you're out of this hellhole called life. You're resting in peace for eternity.
Yes, absolutely. So it's mixed feelings of sadness, but there's definite just utter total joy that they're not feeling this pain anymore. So thank you so much, and I appreciate it again, Michael. And
very welcome.
And we will see you on the next episode of the Right to No Longer Exist podcast. Have a great day or night whenever you're listening to this, and take care of yourselves. Bye.
You have been listening to the Right to No Longer Exist, a Right to Die podcast. We hope that you have enjoyed your time and found the information valuable. Please visit us at therightttonolongerexist.com to learn more about our organization and mission statement. You can also follow us on our social media platforms at The Right to No Longer Exist. There you will find links to our individual channels as well. If you would like to contact us, please email therighttonolongerexist@gmail.com. Thank you for your time, and let's remember that during the time that it took to listen to this podcast, dozens, if not hundreds of people endured a horrific death by suicide. Let's fight together for a world where this doesn't happen anymore. See you next time on the Right to No Longer Exist podcast.